Hey folks, welcome back. Today's video is going to be kind of a laid back chit-chatty video talking about when is a good time to DNF a book. DNFing a book being when you don't finish it, when you put it down and say this book is not for me, or disliking a book so much that you don't want to continue with it. I'll be answering questions from the DNF tag. I will be sure to link the original creator in the description down below. The first question of this tag being, do you DNF? And the answer is, I do now. I used to not DNF books. I had such a strong compulsion or such a strong need to finish books because I felt so guilty about putting down a book, even if I really was not enjoying myself, which for me is a general mode of operation that I am sort of addressing, learning to examine and redirect when necessary. But it was something that was definitely a big part of my younger years, my growing up, in many different things, and especially with reading, feeling like if I hadn't finished a book that I had started out to, that I had failed the book or I had failed as a reader. However, I think there was a point a couple years ago where I was in the midst of reading, I think 2 or 3 books that I was really not enjoying, and it made me kind of dread picking up a book. Reading has always been something that has brought me joy, that has given me that serotonin boost that I needed. And so to have part of my life that is usually such a source of joy for me become so painful and feel like such a chore. And I will also say this was during a period in my life where I very much needed this source of serotonin, the source of joy. And so I think for me, I reached a sort of internal breaking point of examining the thought process of, well, I have to do this, I have to do this. And finally asking myself the question, do you really have to do this? Do you really have to finish these books if they are truly making you unhappy? And since then, I feel like I've become much better about being able to put down a book, either because I realize this book is really not for me, I'm not enjoying it. And so in the years since that initial revelation, I have definitely become more comfortable with the idea and better practicing when I need to. The act of DNFing a book if I'm really not enjoying it or getting anything out of it. And let me tell you, the relief of realizing that I have that sort of escape hatch, shall we say, from books that feel like a slog to get through is honestly a relief. And I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I wish I'd started doing it sooner. Second question is, if you DNF a book, do you count it towards your books read that month? And for this, I'll say no for the most part. If I've gotten to like 80 or 90% through a book, then I might just sneak it in with the books that I have read, because at that point it feels like, you know, I've done most of it, or I've put myself through to this point. Or it could be a book where up until that point I'd enjoyed it, I'd liked it, but if there is, something that happens that feels utterly out of left field, that is not enjoyable, and, or a plot twist that feels like it's ruined the story for me, I will say I really appreciate how Storygraph will still log the hours that you have listened to on an audiobook or the pages that you've read in a physical book and still count them towards your overall potential like page goal or pages that you've read that year, but it will not count the actual book as a book finished, which I think is really cool. The next question is there a difference between DNFing a book and just putting it down for a bit? And to this I say yes. When I DNF a book, I have no intention of going back to it. I have made the decision to release the book out into the world, and other people can enjoy it, but I will not put myself through the rest of it. As far as putting down a book for a bit goes, there are definitely books where I have started that I realize that I'm not in the right mood for, or it's not the right time, or I'm just overwhelmed with other books that I'm currently reading, and I'll put them down, but definitely have an intention to pick them back up in the future. On the shelf behind me right here is my to-be-read pile, books that I discussed in my spring TBR video, and then next to it is other books that I'm sort of currently reading / are on pause, put down for a bit. There's a volume of Virginia Woolf's diary on that shelf and a large volume of a Norton anthology of poetry, as well as Hannah Louise Poston's poetry book, Julia Hungry, that I've sort of been on and off picking up again after having read it and adored it, just to dip in and revisit the poems. So all of that to say, those are books that I'm currently dipping in and out of while also having books that I'm actively reading. I definitely have a propensity to get excited about a lot of different books and want to start them and then realize I don't always have the time or bandwidth to devote all of my energy to reading them all at once. So that's sort of what's happened here. I have 2 books that I'm actively reading. I have a book over on my bedside table that is sort of I really need to focus on finishing that one after I finish the 2 books that I'm currently reading, but they're all sort of in my currently reading pile, if that makes sense. The next question of the tag is, what popular books have you DNF'd? The first one I'll mention is a YA fantasy sci-fi one called Crier's War by Nina Varela. It's a young adult sapphic romance, which I know for some people was really exciting to see. And, you know, if you enjoyed that book, found joy in it, please continue to enjoy it. For me, it was just one that it felt like a slog to get through. It felt very YA, it felt very tropey. And I remember the dialogue was just, to me, not great. And so I hit the eject button on that one for me. I wouldn't consider this a popular book, but a popular author rather. The first book that I read by Ian McEwan was Sweet Tooth. And let me tell you, it was kind of painful to read. Well written in the sense of structure and description, but we're following a young woman in the 1960s or 70s in London who gets involved in the MI6 program, sort of a espionage program for the British government, having a weird romantic relationship with an older man. But I just remember the thoughts in the narration that were happening inside the head of the female character were just incredibly misogynistic, and it made me very uncomfortable. And after a point, I think I got about a third of the way through the book and I was like, I can't do this anymore, which made me really wary to pick up his book Atonement. But I will say I did read Atonement. I really enjoyed Atonement. It is well worth the hype. But yeah, I had that weird initial experience of knowing that Atonement was a really popular book by this author, but reading another of his books and sort of questioning, do I even want to try Atonement? I'm glad I read Atonement, but I would still say I'm kind of wary of picking up any future Ian McEwan books just based off of my first experience with him. I ended up not being able to get through one of the books by the Bronte sisters, and that was Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. I just found it to be incredibly dreary and dull. I apologize if the Bronte canon is in your realm of favorite books, favorite writers, but for me, it was not enjoyable. The next question is, what books do you wish you had DNF'd? And the first book that immediately came to mind was Vampire Hunter D by Hideyuki Kikuchi. I forget which monthly wrap-up I did a review of this book. I will link it up in the cards if I can find it. But yeah, safe to say this was a awful book. The reason I picked it up is there are a few movies that have been made based off of the books, and the movies themselves are visually very interesting, the stories are fun. Not necessarily my favorite movies, but movies that I enjoyed and wanted to experience the source material. Safe to say, Vampire Hunter D, the first book, I believe came out in the 1970s, is one of the most misogynistic things that I have ever read in my life. It was so bad as far as, you know, misogyny goes, but also just the overall writing, plot structure, world building, and the characters. And yeah, I think I was listening to that book as an audiobook from the library. I think I remember definitely reaching a point where I was asking myself, do you really want to finish this? There was part of me that definitely wanted to DNF it, but there was a larger part of me that wanted to finish it out of spite so I could give it a very spicy, sarcastic review in the monthly wrap-up. But yeah, I think if I had been reading it physically, I would have DNF'd it. It was, I think, in part because it was the audiobook format, but also spite. And the other book that I wish I had DNF'd, this is an unpopular opinion, likely, but The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I loathe that book. Went in with very high expectations, and I don't know if it was the really high expectations or just the widespread adoration and cult following of that book. Don't know if I should say this because then I might actually do it. But part of me almost wants to revisit that book just so I can pick it apart and analyze it and be able to fully articulate the reasons why I really did not enjoy the book. Yes, the characters are unlikable. I don't have a problem with unlikable characters. I have problems with glorification of privilege, which is something that I've experienced in both Donna Tartt books that I've read. So yeah, really did not like The Secret History. Stay tuned to see if I actually do a book review on it, if I end up revisiting it out of spite. The next question is, what do you do with books that you DNF? If it's a physical book, I'm more than happy to donate it to my local library's book sale or to a used bookstore in my area. I don't like keeping things just to keep things. That's something that has definitely become more of a thing for me as I've gotten older, and yeah, just in general being critical and self-examining of the things that I decide to keep. And that's not to say that I don't keep things because they're sentimental. I certainly do. You know, if I read a book and really didn't like it, or even if I liked it well enough but I don't see myself rereading it, then I definitely have no qualms with donating it to my library's book sale, which, looking at the shelves behind me, you might question me saying that, but truthfully, all of the books that are on my shelves are ones that either I am still very excited to read or have read and were 5 stars, ones that I want to revisit. The next question is, do you choose more or less risky titles because of your stance on DNFing? I feel like my stance on DNFing hasn't really affected the books that I choose to pick up. Like I said for the previous question, the current book collection that I have is pretty curated as far as, she says with an entire wall of books behind her, but it's curated down to books that I'm genuinely interested in picking up and have a strong inclination that I'm likely to enjoy them. That's why they're on my shelf, that's why I picked them up, that's why friends have gifted them to me. I think for me also, using the app Hoopla to get audiobooks and ebooks from my library has definitely helped me be better about DNFing books, simply because there is sort of a little to no consequences for returning a book immediately if I don't enjoy it. I feel less pressure picking up a book that I feel a little bit unsure of, or one that I haven't taken a lot of time to vet as to whether I want to pick it up and add it to my collection. I'm not buying it. There's no monetary loss for me. Yeah, there have been a few times where I've actually tested out books on my library's Hoopla app to see if I have an interest in them. And there have been a few where I've tested them out and realized, oh no, I really do enjoy this. I would actually prefer to have a physical copy of it. So that's been a great way for me to vet books coming into my collection. But for me at this point, I am definitely trying to look at book buying with a mindset of, if I'm picking up a physical copy of a book, if I'm paying for it, I want it to be one that I'm really invested in reading pretty soon, or really invested in, about to say the idea that I'll like the book, invested in the green flags that I see in a book description or in someone else's review of a book that lead me to believe that I would enjoy reading it. But yeah, overall, I would say my stance on DNFing books has little to no effect on the books that I choose to pick up. And then the last part of this tag video is to tag some fellow booktubers to do the tag. If you are a fellow booktuber watching this video and you would like to do this tag, I tag you. If you aren't someone with a booktube channel but would like to answer some of these questions, I would love to see your answers in the comments below. I would also specifically like to see M from Manuscripts in the Margins do this tag. I think it would be really interesting to see that from them. If you haven't already, I would highly recommend going and checking out M's channel. They are new on the booktube scene. I really enjoy their videos. They made a really interesting video recently with book recommendations talking about grief and surrealism that I will link down below for you to go check out. But yeah, my friends, that is today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did so, please give it a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. If you aren't already subscribed to the channel and would like to see more from me, I'd love to have you subscribe and stick around. But yeah, folks, I'm gonna wrap up this video. I hope you are having a good day, week, whenever you're watching this, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.